Them came something our history books prefer not to describe. Let's picture it together. It's the year 70 AD. You're standing on the Appian Way, the dust of the road coating your sandals. In the distance, a triumphant column approaches the eternal city. Silk banners ripple. Polished armor flashes like a river of fire in the sun. The soldiers march in flawless, terrifying unison. And among them, bound neck to neck by heavy iron chains, walk hundreds of women. Their clothes are ragged. Their feet are bare and bloodied. But it's their eyes you notice. Hollow. Empty. Eyes that have already seen a future where death would have been a mercy. This is the unspoken cost of conquest. This is what happened after the last wall fell, after the last enemy sword was thrown down. This is an account of the aftermath. Of what truly followed a Roman victory. Of the specific, systematized fate reserved for female prisoners of war. These were not the random brutalities of war, but practices that transformed military success into an engine of sustained horror. What you are about to hear is not imagination. It is preserved in generals' own letters, in the cold prose of ancient historians, in legal and financial records that have survived 2,000 years. And yet, it has been carefully smoothed over in our school lessons and major films. Some truths are simply too unsettling. Before we step into this deliberately forgotten history, if you believe in uncovering the past as it was, not as we wish it were, support this channel. Subscribe. It's a small gesture, but it lets us keep revealing what power once worked so hard to normalize. We are taught a certain version. The version of glory. Invincible legions conquering the known world. Victorious generals in chariots parading down the Via Sacra as the crowd roars. Prisoners of war marched behind them, living proof of imperial dominance. The official story is clean. The captives became slaves. They were sent to mines, to farms, to the households of wealthy Romans. A brutal fate, yes, but presented as a standard, almost natural, consequence of ancient warfare. It's orderly. It's logical. But the surviving documents tell another story. Let's take one example. A military report from the reign of Emperor Trajan after the conquest of Dacia in 106 AD. It states, matter-of-factly, that approximately 15,000 women were taken captive. The record mentions only their distribution among the legions and their subsequent transfer to the provinces. Distribution. Transfer. These are administrative words. Bloodless words. They hide the reality behind a screen of bureaucracy. But when you find the personal accounts, the letters soldiers scrawled home, the private diaries dug up from the ruins of frontier forts, that word distribution begins to curdle. Because what happened to these women before they ever became domestic slaves was a ritual. A ritual of systematic humiliation. A celebration of victory written on the bodies of the defeated. This wasn't random violence spilling over after a battle. It was a political act, disguised as battlefield reward. When a city fell, the Romans followed a sequence. A procedure. First, men of fighting age were separated. Some were executed on the spot. Others were spared for the gladiatorial arena. Children and the elderly were often deemed useless, left to starve or be killed for expediency. Then came the women. Young women were a separate category. They were treated differently. They were assembled in the central square of the conquered town. They were stripped. And they were left there, exposed under the sun and the gaze of the entire legion, for hours, sometimes days. During this time, officers conducted their deselection. The most physically attractive were marked with a red dye on the shoulder and set aside for the commanders. The rest were allocated to the rank-and-file soldiers by lot or by rank. There was even a formal Latin term for this, praeta bellica feminarium. Female war spoils. The phrase appears in military manuals. It appears in official correspondence. It was, for all legal and moral purposes, simply another form of loot. And yes, the Roman state levied a tax on this property. A fragment of a letter, discovered in Pompeii, written by a legionary named Marcus Flavius during a campaign in Germania, describes the scene with chilling detachment. "I took 3 for myself on the first night. The youngest cried without stopping. The second tried to bite. The third simply stared at nothing, as if she were already gone. I preferred the third. She was easier." That word easier echoes across centuries. It exposes the core of this violence. It wasn't driven purely by desire. It was about domination. About erasing a person's dignity before erasing their identity. About converting a human being into a compliant object before the paperwork made them a formal slave. Roman generals understood the political purpose of this ritual with absolute clarity. This wasn't about letting soldiers blow off steam. It was a demonstration of total power. A message delivered without subtlety to any population that dreamed of resistance. This is what happens to your daughters, your sisters, your mothers. And the message was terrifyingly effective. The public violation was only the beginning. It was the shock tactic. What followed was the slow, cold machinery of the state, turning people into permanent property. After the first days of terror came the branding. Literally. Hot irons were pressed into flesh, leaving marks that identified the legion that captured them and the campaign. These were marks of ownership, often placed on the face or another visible area, so their status could never be concealed. Then came the transport. The survivors, now branded, were chained together in coffles of 10 or 20 and forced to march hundreds of miles toward the coast. At the ports, they were held in Horia warehouses. The same dank, dark storage buildings used for grain, olive oil, and building materials. They were inventoried, stored, and waited for shipment. A commercial inventory from Alexandria, dated to 115 AD, records the mixed cargo of a merchant vessel bound for Italy, 340 amphorae of wine, 120 barrels of Egyptian wheat, 89 women from Judea, category, captive, 14 Berber horses. Women. Listed alongside wine, wheat, and livestock. Same ledger. Same column. Same economic value. The sea crossing could take weeks. They were kept below deck, chained in rows with barely room to sit, never to lie down. Rations were calculated precisely to keep them alive, not to nourish. Many died en route, from disease, dehydration, or a broken will. Their bodies were tossed overboard without ceremony. The Roman agricultural writer, Columella, in a treatise on estate management, coolly estimated that an acceptable loss rate during the transport of female captives was between 20 and 30%. He wrote of it in the same tone he used for discussing spoilage of grain. When they finally arrived in Ostia, the port of Rome, or in other major cities, the next phase began, the market. Specialized slave markets, like the one near the Temple of Castor in the Roman Forum, were where wealthy buyers inspected this human merchandise. They were poked, prodded, made to walk and jump. Their teeth were examined, their mouths forced open. Signs of illness, injury, or, crucially, pregnancy, were carefully noted. A pregnant woman was a complication, the child's status was ambiguous, and she was less valuable for immediate use. The youngest, most desirable women commanded astronomical prices. They were purchased by patricians for their private households, by elite brothel keepers, or by temples dedicated to certain goddesses like Venus, which often operated sanctioned prostitution. The rest, those whose looks had faded on the journey, those marked by too many scars, those who had broken mentally and stared vacantly, were sold in bulk. Buyers for mines, for large agricultural latifundia, for weaving workshops would take them at a discount. In those places, life expectancy was measured in a handful of years. But there was a fate considered by many historians to be the worst of all: the state-sanctioned brothel. These establishments, called lupanaria, operated openly in every Roman city. They were legal, regulated, and taxed. The Roman state profited directly from every transaction inside them. And female prisoners of war were their most sought-after commodity. Why? Because they were foreign. Because they came from a defeated people. Because for an ordinary Roman citizen, a baker, a clerk, a laborer who had never held a sword, violating the daughter of a conquered enemy offered a perverse sense of participation in the empire's glory. It was conquest by proxy. A piece of graffiti found scratched on the wall of a Pompeii brothel captures this perfectly: hic ego puellum pertanum futui. Roma aeterna est. Here I screwed a British girl. Rome is eternal. The women in these places lost their names. They were identified only by their origin: the Gaul, the German, the Jewess. They worked in cubicles smaller than a modern bathroom stall, with just a thin curtain for a door. They were required to service between 10 and 20 men a day. There was no retirement. No escape. Many turned to suicide. Others sank into a catatonic despair the Romans called animus mortis, a dead spirit. A tiny number survived long enough to be freed, perhaps if a buyer took pity or they earned enough money. But freedom didn't erase the past. The brand on the face remained. The memories in the body remained. The Greek physician Cyrenus of Ephesus, working in Rome in the 2nd century AD, wrote a textbook on gynecology. One chapter addresses ailments common among women in brothels. He describes chronic infections, traumatic injuries, and early infertility. Then he adds, almost as an aside, brothel keepers are advised to renew their stock every 3 or 4 years, as after this period the merchandise loses both commercial value and productive capacity. Renew their stock. As if replacing worn-out tools. And all of this entire industrial system of dehumanization, functioned in the open. Nothing was hidden. Nothing was denied. There was no shame. It was simply the way the world worked. The logical, orderly outcome of military victory. Rome won. Therefore, the defeated paid. They paid with their freedom, their bodies, and their futures. The most haunting thing about this history is the silence. We have almost no first-person accounts from the victims themselves. They were often illiterate, or they didn't speak Latin or Greek. They had no access to the materials to write. And even if they had, who would have recorded it? But there are cracks in the silence. Disturbing, powerful cracks. In the 2nd century, a slave woman named Blandina appears in early Christian writings. She was originally captured in Gaul. While serving in a Roman household, she converted to Christianity. When her faith was discovered, she was arrested. During interrogation, she was asked if she feared death by wild beasts in the arena. A fragment of the record preserves her response. They asked if I feared death. I told them I had already died many times. They killed me the night my village burned. They killed me on the march to the sea. They killed me in the ship's hold. They killed me the first time a Roman man called me property. Death before the lions would only confirm what was already true. Blandina was executed. But her words survive. They reveal the core trauma. It wasn't just physical, it was existential. The destruction of the very idea of being a person. These women were forced to learn a terrible lesson, that human dignity is not a right. It is a convention, and conventions can be revoked by the man with the sword. Once that truth is learned, it can never be unlearned. Another document, a court record from a rural estate in Spain in the 2nd century, tells of a rebellion. Enslaved women, led by a Germanic captive known only as the Red-Haired One, killed their owner and his family. When captured, the leader was brought before a Roman magistrate. Before being sentenced to crucifixion, she said only this: "You taught us that the world belongs to the violent. We only practiced the lesson." Her statement was recorded as evidence of her barbarity. To us, it reads as a devastating indictment of the entire system. Rome saw itself as the beacon of civilization, replacing chaos with law. But that civilization was built on a foundation of organized, licensed violence. And when the victims used that same violent logic, they were condemned as monsters. So, we are left with a question. Have we moved past this? Or have we merely gotten better at hiding it, at using more sophisticated language? History books give maybe a paragraph to the fate of prisoners in antiquity. The language is vague, enslaved, exploited. This silence exists for a reason. As the historian Carlo Ginzburg once noted, the line between what a society celebrates and what it buries is almost always drawn by the powerful. Rome is the foundation of Western civilization. Our laws, our governments, our architecture trace lines back to it. To fully confront the systematized sexual violence that was a standard operating procedure of its expansion is to confront an uncomfortable truth about how civilizations are often built. They are not built only by philosophers and engineers. They are also built on the broken bodies of the vanquished, on a calculated program of terror designed to shatter the will to resist. We prefer the cleaner story. We marvel at the aqueducts, analyze the legion's tactics, quote the philosophers. We watch films where gladiators fight for freedom, but the camera never pans to the brothel right next to the arena, where the female captives from the same war were put to work. That would make us uncomfortable. But history should make us uncomfortable. There is a small tombstone in the Museum of London. It was found near the site of a Roman fort. The inscription is simple, Hic et femina. Nomen interriet. Patria interriet. De merum ei misericordiam prestant quam Roma fecit. Here lies a woman. Her name is lost. Her homeland is lost. May the gods show her more mercy than Rome did. No name. No story. Just an anonymous plea for mercy, 2,000 years too late. How many millions of such stones were never carved? How many lives were reduced to a line in a ledger, 89 women from Judea, and then erased? This was not a momentary frenzy. It was methodical. Repeated. Normalized. It was not a failure of the Roman system. It was the system working exactly as intended. War, as some scholars argue, is not a breakdown of order. For the victor, it is the ultimate expression of it. The weeping of those millions of women, whose names we will never know, is the silent bedrock beneath the marble monuments. They built Rome, too. They built it with everything they were, and everything they were never allowed to be. When we look back at antiquity with uncritical awe, when we teach only the glory and not the gruesome cost, we become complicit in that ancient silence. We continue the work of erasure. The final, uneasy question is this: when we hear reports from modern conflict zones of systematic rape, of human trafficking, of refugees treated as less than human, are we hearing the echoes of Rome? Have the methods just evolved, dressed now in the language of identities?